This is part 2 of chapter 16. We'll look at our indirect transmission. So vehicle transmission, so is food and water, but also airborne. So I forgot about that one. Waterborne, right? Untreated water or poorly treated sewage. Excuse me. Then we have our foodborne transmission, which is either you can just not completely cook it, like our salmonella we talked about, or they can be poorly managed, basically poorly refrigerated, not cared for, or they can be prepared in an unsanitary condition. You have a dirty kitchen, you have people who are not taking care of washing their hands. Sorry about that. And then airborne, how this is different than droplet is because it's more than 1 meter. So sometimes if the bacteria or virus is small enough, it can actually hover on dust particles in the air and can stay present in the air for hours at a time. And so it's possible that you walk into a room where someone has coughed, 30 minutes before, and they have measles, and then you could actually contract measles, even though you never directly came in contact with the person. Here are some other diseases that can be spread through airborne transmission. Sorry guys. All right, so then we have indirect vehicle, right? This is our food source, just a look at buffets, and you'll never look at a buffet again the same way again. But buffets need to be kept cold or very hot. So anything in between is that temperature zone where if something did have bacteria in it, the bacteria can multiply, or if bacteria can make toxins in that sort of like warm zone. Remember, it's called temperature abuse. So be careful at, buffets or picnics when things have sat out for a long time, especially if people, like there's kids around, they're using their fingers to grab at things. You want to make sure that the food is, kept at the correct temperature. So for vectors can transmit 2 ways. They can do it mechanically or biologically. So remember, a vector is usually an insect, all right? And so this is an example of mechanical, where a fly, finds some poop and then lands on the poop, and whatever germ, the bacteria or virus within the feces sticks to the fly's foot. The fly travels, lands on your food, and then you eat the food, right? So that is mechanical transmission. Biological means a sting or a bite, usually a bite. So mosquitoes are very, they're common vectors to spread different kinds of diseases, West Nile, malaria. So lots of diseases spread by biological transmission by mosquitoes. So these are just some common vectors, so if you look at, there's flies, fleas, kissing bugs, lice, mites, mosquitoes, sandfly, ticks, and tsetse fly. These are all different vectors that are commonly cause these diseases. You do not need to memorize any of these. All right, so the last thing we're talking about is nosocomial infections, where we did talk about this before, right? So our nosocomial infection are hospital-acquired infections, and they're very common because when you have a hospital, right, you have lots of microbes. People are there because they're sick, and a lot of those illnesses are due to infectious disease. Then you have a lot of immunocompromised patients in the hospital. So you have people with weakened immune systems, you have a lot of microbes around, and then you have this chain of transmission between staff and patients. It could also be visitors and patients, and among patients themselves, if they're mobile and they can walk around. So that is the 3 factors that really play into why nosocomial infections are so prevalent. How can you prevent them? Basically, number 1, frequent and thorough hand washing. Of course, we're going to use aseptic techniques to disinfect all items that are reused. Lots of things are single use at a hospital, that you want to handle contaminated material carefully, dispose of waste carefully, sterilize your equipment according to the instructions, and make sure it's carefully sterilized. You can also prevent, if they're very serious infections, they usually get an isolation room or isolation ward. And then, of course, education. So here again, if you look at the protective measures to prevent the spread of different diseases, you're going to have different guidelines for different diseases. So if it's enteric, that means it's in your intestines. It's usually caused by oral fecal, right? Something comes in your mouth and it comes out your other side. So we want to make sure that we're having people with special precautions for disposing of the feces and urine, and gloves and gowns, right? Masks are not super required here, obviously, because we're not going to get an enteric infection through droplets. We're going to get it through contaminating our food or water or something that we're eating. Respiratory infections is going to be masks, of course. So private room and closed door if necessary, because respiratory room we have droplets, some are airborne, so it can stay in the room, and etc. So I just wanted to point out that protective measures are different for different kinds of infections. This is a picture of an isolation ward where we have people transported. I thought this was really interesting, where they have a special transport bubble, a containment system, so you don't contaminate people who are transporting you. And this would be a ward where those specific, patients, this could be a tuberculosis ward, for example. This happens to be an Ebola ward. So we want to make sure that Ebola is actually easily spread from person to person. They bleed a lot. So Ebola is a nasty virus. We'll talk about it later too, but you want to keep them separate from the general population. Lastly, there's this new emerging diseases. So what is an emerging disease? Emerging diseases they can be new, okay, like brand new viruses that have maybe only been within the ape community or monkey community, and because we are encroaching on different we're encroaching into their habitat, right? With roads and streets and buildings. We are becoming more and more in contact with animals that maybe were not so in contact with humans. And so Ebola is one of these. It's considered emerging because it had several outbreaks, but you see the outbreaks are getting more and more. Emerging diseases can also be something that is it's been around all the time. However, it has become resistant to drugs. So we have these drug-resistant pathogens that are also considered emerging because they are causing a second round of infection that's rising, and they need to find new ways to contain it. And that is it for chapter 16.